My name is Mariette DiCristina, and I'm the Dean of the College of Communication. I'm also a COM alum and also the former editor-in-chief of Scientific American, who has worked on the top 10 emerging technologies list with the World Economic Forum in the past. So I can't wait to learn from today's speakers on today's Com Talks topic, being a woman in tech. This event is being recorded and will be available on the COM website afterward. I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us, and thanks to our organizers for their hard work in supporting these events. As we know, women are often quite outnumbered by men in tech fields, and today's fantastic panel will explore such issues that women face as overcoming imposter syndrome, the importance of female mentorship, how to advocate for yourself in a predominantly male field, and how we can all play a part in empowering more women to join the field of tech. You'll be able to ask them your questions as well. Just put them in the Q&A box as you have them at the bottom of your screens. The chat function is off for this meeting. Now I'm really excited to introduce our speakers today. First, let's meet Rachel Allen, who graduated from COM in 2015 with a degree in journalism. She's worked in digital magazine roles before moving into a content marketing and design role at LVMH. In 2019, Rachel decided to pivot to the user experience space and is currently UX designer at Amazon, where she works in the employee experience design team. She's lived in New York City for the past 5 years, but has moved home to New Hampshire during the pandemic. Although she works in tech now, she still loves nothing more than to read a good magazine cover to cover, my kind of woman. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. Now let's say hello to Jill Glynn, a 2009 graduate of COM. Jill is a manager of scaled engagement at LinkedIn. She leads a global team of program managers responsible for educating LinkedIn customers on recruitment products and tools. She was previously head of the global sales enablement at Snap Inc., the owners of Snapchat and Bitmoji. Jill works in Manhattan and lives in New Jersey with her husband and 2-year-old son. Thanks so much for joining us, Jill.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Now let's say hi to Kath Anderson, who has more than a decade of experience storytelling for top global brands focused on transforming their industries. She's worked in-house at Fortune 500 companies such as Apple, Google, and now Facebook. From the ground up at startups, whoops, okay. Yikes. I'm sorry about that. Suddenly Zoom wanted to update me. Let me try that again. And I just said, please stop. Okay, so here we are, live events. Let me start with that sentence again. So Kath has worked in-house at Fortune 500 companies such as Apple, Google, and now Facebook. She's also built the corporate communications function from the ground up at startups such as the national telehealth company American Well. Early in her career, she worked on change communications for a program to help Iraq and Afghanistan veterans overcome the stigma around getting care for PTSD. Very important. Ran Massachusetts state comms for Al Gore's clean energy campaign and worked in public affairs for the US Navy at the Pentagon. Today, she helps lead the privacy communications team at Facebook. Welcome to you, Kat.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Great to have you. And now let's say hello to Margaret Wallace, who's co-founder of Playmatics, a game development studio. She's an award-winning entrepreneur and creator of digital and real-world games, products, and other interactive experiences. Her games-related achievements have spanned a variety of industry sectors, ranging from entertainment to healthcare, education, XR, and neurogaming. Margaret was named one of Forbes's 12 women to watch in tech, 12 women in gaming to watch, and previously highlighted by Fortune as one of 10 powerful women in video games. She also mentors and advises companies and teams of all sizes to help drive their efforts in scaling around product, design thinking, innovation, brands, and business development. When she's not playing games, Margaret, you can find Margaret on Twitter or podcasting. Hi, Margaret. Nice to see you.
Hey, I'm really happy to be here. Hey, everyone.
It's awesome to have you. And now I'd like to give a special welcome to our moderator, Jody Luber. Jody is Associate Professor of the Practice in Film and Television in our Media Ventures program here at COM. She's a grad of both CGS and has both a bachelor's in broadcast journalism and a master's in science journalism from COM. She's co-founder of womensforum.com, a top 10 website for women. And today, womensforum.com is recognized as one of the pioneering women's content and advertising networks in the industry. Earlier in her career, Jody also wrote and produced for cable television and was a freelance writer. Over to you, Jody, and welcome.
Thank you, Dean Christina, for such a nice introduction. I am so delighted to be here, and we really appreciate everyone joining in the midst of the election results coming in. We know it's been a crazy night and crazy day, so thank you all so much. Thank you for mentioning the Media Ventures program. We focus in that program on how content and technology bring new ideas to the market, so it is really my honor to help everyone who's watching and listening get to know all these talented women who do exactly that every single day. So you're in for a treat. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Let me start by noting that when many of you were at COM, your positions didn't even exist. They were emerging. Some of your companies didn't exist. So let's think about that for a second. And let me start by asking you, when you were at BU, what did you want to do or be? And are you surprised by the trajectory that your career has taken? Let's just go around and take the pulse of that. Whoever wants to begin.
Well, since I think I'm the earliest graduate, I graduated in 1989. I was really fortunate to have had a lot of support from the mass communication department that I was a part of. And I always had an interest in technology and communication research. So even though I didn't know I would eventually be in the video games industry, which was incredibly niche back then, as it still is in some ways now, I wrote my undergraduate thesis on ATM machines and cashless societies. So I had a lot of support around doing that and a lot of interest around issues around the telecommunications and stuff like that. So I feel like my experience at COM really set me along that pathway, but never in a million years did I imagine I would have a career, a lifelong career in tech, specifically games.
That's terrific. I love how you were so forward thinking to write about ATMs. It's fantastic. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would jump in just to say that my undergrad degree at COM was in journalism, print. And then halfway through, I pivoted to broadcast. And then by the end of my time there, as I graduated, I was 100% focused on PR. So I would say that, sort of the guidance that folks give around your career not being linear is true, not just for your career, but like well before it starts. I think your time at COM oftentimes is a journey in and of itself, and you learn a lot about yourself, and you quickly learn what you don't like and what you do like. And at least for me, my experience interning was exactly that. Certain things really clicked, certain things absolutely did not. And it was a little bit jarring because I'm a very type A person. So I thought I was building, on this very direct path towards print, but looking back, it was the exact opposite. And I'm thankful for that. But at the time, it was a little unsettling. So yeah, in addition, everybody was talking about how the future of print was, really gloomy, and nobody would have jobs in 5 years. So
Interesting.
take that with a grain of salt.
Interesting how that's a similar conversation today, so many years later.
Exactly.
Right. Jill?
Yeah, so I thinking about this is funny because I get asked all the time. My major in comm was journalism, and my role now is managing a team of program managers who deliver scaled education, which definitely didn't exist back then. And everyone's like, how did you end up where you are now? And the journey, I think, Kath, you kind of mentioned this, while not linear, I think one thing kind of leads to the next. So when I graduated in 2009, the economy wasn't that great. So I took the first job I could get. So I wanted to be, to answer your first question, Jody, I wanted to be a journalist, particularly for gossip magazines. That wasn't happening. I ended up at a staffing firm in Boston, and it wasn't a perfect fit for my skill set. So I was part of the role was doing cold calls and business development. I was not very good at it, which my manager addressed with me. So I pivoted and I used the skills that I did have from COM, which at the time was emerging social media, writing. So I started their social strategy and their blog strategy. I started educating my peer recruiters on the space. And then that kind of led one thing to another, which eventually landed me at LinkedIn, seemingly in a totally different space. But I think I always kind of use those core skills of writing, connecting, and curiosity to follow this trajectory.
It's great. Rachel?
Yeah, I have a similar experience. I wanted to work at a fashion magazine on the print side, and that was my dream since I was probably 12 or 13 years old. And even when I was in comm, that's what I was still kind of pursuing. And I went to New York 2 summers when I was in college, and the first summer I interned at Elle on the print side. And by the time I graduated, like 2 years after that internship, I decided to go the digital route because print was just becoming smaller and smaller. And so I think I had a similar experience where each kind of role I've had since then has built on the next. And I wanted to work at a print magazine because I used to, like I said in my bio, sit in my room and read magazines cover to cover. And, working on the digital side of magazines didn't really give me that sort of same feeling. And so I said, okay, well, what can I do that would maybe allow me to be a part of creating experiences that made me feel the way print magazines did. And so that's when I decided to kind of go more upstream and work at a luxury company where I could kind of help create those experiences. And yeah, my job now, if you had told me that's what I would have been doing when I was in comm, I would have probably stomped my foot and said, no, I want to work. So it's really unbelievable that in 5 years, I'm doing something really completely different and something I had no idea even existed, but it all sort of circuitously, led me to where I am now.
I think that's what's fascinating about the trajectory of all of these careers. Let me ask, 3 out of 4 of you have journalism degrees, as do I, as do our dean. Do you think there are some complementary skill sets in journalism and the work that you do? Yeah, Kath, also.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I think that the curiosity and the drive that is required to be a journalist and is also required by comm as you go through the journalism program serves you well regardless of where you land. It's probably one of the most important character traits. In fact, at Facebook, we look for curiosity and adaptability across our comm team. And I think that those are qualities that frankly, sometimes they're inherent, but they don't have to be. They can be built over time. Learning how to ask questions and ask smart questions and effective questions to move something along a trajectory towards your goal is not easy. It's something that I think even within big tech is really important for every role. And so I think I lean on that skill set every day. I also have never kind of lost that hunger, that drive, that thing that made me, trudge through 2 feet of snow with a camera as a one-man show to cover some, protest at, I don't know, down at Fenway. That's what has stuck with me. And some of it I think is personality and sometimes, but I do think that it's something that's instilled as part of the curriculum at BU. So yeah.
Okay.
I can chime in there. I was gonna say the same thing as you, Kath, adaptability and agility. I think that has been a huge one and goes hand in hand with curiosity. So I think that's just been so important. For me, I've been on and off at LinkedIn for 8 years. So I've seen the business grow, develop, change. And the folks that I see being most successful are the ones who are curious about the big picture, the mission, the vision, and adaptable to move along with those changes. The other thing that came to mind, Jody, when you asked the question, for me, because this was top of mind with the conversation I had with someone yesterday, but knowing the audience. So that has helped me, having the journalism background, when I'm writing a business case, knowing the audience, whether I'm writing to a director, a senior director, if I'm writing to someone in North America or in Asia Pacific, just being able to write in a way that's relevant to the audience, that has really helped me.
I think that makes sense. Rachel, you're going to add something?
I agree with you both. And I think, one thing I've learned is you really shouldn't sell yourself short of the skills that you learn in just interacting with people at work. And I think there's lots of people who don't know how to do that, but I think you learn some of those skills when you get a degree in comm. And the other piece too is, at Amazon, this is kind of a relatively well-known thing. We have a big writing culture, and people may have read about this, but we have we write docs when we want to communicate new ideas, and people actually don't use PowerPoints a lot. And so when I came in, I was like, this is awesome for me because I do my best communicating through writing. And so I was able to jump in and do that pretty quickly. But it's really interesting to see that there are lots of people who truly do not have that skill. And people might write that off and say writing or whatever, when you work at tech, people want you to have these other skill sets, but it's really, I think, something that it's going to serve well in communicating. So
I think you're all highlighting the importance of being able to write and speak, write letters, write papers, communicate other than with emojis and texts, which is something I think we all have to fight against. So thank you for sharing that. Margaret, I want to ask you about something that you shared when we spoke. I think it's really interesting. You are a serial entrepreneur. You've started several companies. You've got a bunch of startups under your belt. And you said something that I've been thinking about a great deal. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this, whether they've been a founder or not. You said that the amount of time and energy that you've spent demanding a seat at the table could have been used to scale your company. And it's wasted energy and it's wasted time. Could you let us in on what that's been like and elaborate on that just a bit?
Absolutely. Fortunately, when I left BU and then also my graduate experience, I had a lot of good armor around me in terms of sort of not feeling, what might be called like the glass ceiling in tech. However, once I entered into the workforce, I quickly discovered that tech is really, in a lot of ways, not a meritocracy. It's more of a meritocracy, where there's a lot of preference among hiring managers and executives to basically hire the 5-year younger version of themselves. And often that can be a male colleague. And it dawned on me pretty early in my career in the video game industry that I saw a lot of mistakes being made by a lot of executives. And I thought to myself, here I am, I'm working these intense hours, building up this IP. I was working on linear cartoon content and also games, branded games. I worked with licenses ranging from everything from South Park to Tim Burton projects. And I was like, you know what? I am better off pouring this energy into a company I own, because at least at the end of the day, I can look back and I can own my mistakes, but I can also own my successes, and I can also own my creations. And that really became very important to me. And it also gave me the freedom to really explore other areas of the tech industry that I may not have had the luxury to explore. Everything's cyclical in our industry, as we know, in any industry. And, there was a time where being a generalist was a very good thing. Now we're in a phase where everyone is supposed to be a specialist and specialize in one thing. And for better or for worse, I've had the luxury to be able to kind of really explore many aspects of the industry, not be pigeonholed, and own my product and my output and my personal brand, as they like to say. So it was a decision I was kind of forced into, but I'm happy I made it.
So it sounded, thank you for sharing that. That's a very courageous step to go from thinking about it. Just obviously doesn't happen overnight. Were those first few years daunting? I mean, what was that like to actually take that step and say, well, now I'm going to create and put up my own shingle in a field that's so competitive?
Well, I was at a startup. I really got my start in the tech industry around the dawn of the dot-com era. And so I met a lot of really great people along the way. And, it gave me the opportunity to meet like-minded people and take those initial steps of starting a company with friends and colleagues. And honestly, looking back, I had a lot of hubris and a lot of bravado, and I was really largely clueless, too clueless to be daunted. So I learned by doing in the early days, contract negotiation, all that kind of thing. But it didn't dawn on me to be afraid, maybe to my detriment in some cases, because I was a little bit naive, but it was good. It was a good way to approach it, I guess. And having friends and colleagues that, that were co-founders really helped a lot.
Not always a bad thing to be somewhat clueless in that regard, one foot in front of the other to keep going. I'd like to remind everybody to please share your questions and just drop them in the Q&A, and we will get to them at the end of this conversation. Rachel, I'd like to turn to you for a second, if I could. You've held very high leadership positions in high-powered male-run companies. You and I talked about roles at Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, arguably the highest top luxury brand conglomerate in the world, and now at Amazon. So these are male-led companies. LVMH, I believe, is a family-owned company as well. And I think we're all familiar with a gentleman named Jeff Bezos as well. As a woman, how do you navigate an upward path in these companies?
I think since joining Amazon, and I'm sure some of the other panelists have experienced this working in tech as well, these companies are so fast moving, so a lot changes very often. And so I am just shy of a year and I am on my third manager already. So things change all the time. And my second manager, well, my first two were both women. And my second manager, she's still on my team. She's just, we have a guy now who is leading our team. But one thing that I've tried to do is just remain really close to her. She's somebody who's been at Amazon for a couple of years. She's gone through the experience of leading a team. She's gone through the experience of leading a big project and being promoted. And so I really lean on her. I talk to her all the time. And there's so many good nuggets of wisdom that she's given me about the company and just in general. And I think, the organization I work in at Amazon is also very male heavy. And especially in leadership roles. However, like my whole team, besides our manager, is actually a lot of women. And so it's kind of an interesting dynamic, but I think the best thing that I've at least figured out to do so far is to really lean on those relationships. And the same goes when I was at LVMH. I was on a really small team. It was led by a man, but the other kind of women in the office, I leaned on them. And I think that's how I'm going to navigate what I hope will be a long career at Amazon, is by leaning on the other women that I know and that I will meet.
It's terrific to hear that there's that support in these companies. I think that's very inspiring. The other panelists have any thoughts on that? How to advance in companies that are male dominated, if you've been in those situations?
I have maybe a funny anecdote that I was given from a a male leader, which I thought was very aggressive, but I've adapted parts of it in terms of advancing. So some advice that's been given to me over time by men and women is that if you want to move forward, always make sure that your manager is aware of that and aware of your goals. The funny piece that Jody, when you said, do you have anything similar, that popped into my head that I wasn't planning on sharing, but this person shared, ask for promotion every 6 months. So it's top of mind for your manager and leader. I do not do that, but I do have regular conversations with my managers and leaders, and I always have on like, here's where I am, here's where I want to go. What do I need to get there? And like, how can I master this role so I'm ready for the next one when that time comes? So a more, slower, steadier pace, but making sure that it is a open dialogue.
Great advice. Great advice. Kath, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would +1 to the mentorship piece. I think it's probably more important than ever before this year. And I know just personally, this year has been a big wake-up call for me in how mentorship sort of happens. And I think Margaret kind of alluded to this earlier as well, but we oftentimes mentor people within our own circles or our family circles or our networks circles. And it's a little bit by default versus, maybe expanding our horizons and mentoring outside of those circles so that we grow ourselves as a mentor and vice versa. So that was my first point. I'm working to do more of that. I actually have a colleague on the Instagram team who has started something during COVID where you can volunteer as a mentor and you get paired up with somebody globally. And I've done about 7 to 10 conversations over the past 3-4 months, and it's been hugely beneficial to me personally. I hope to them, but and then second, I would just say I have learned that there is a lot of good advice out there, but that you don't always have to absorb all of it. For a long time after I graduated, I just assumed that people who had been in the industry longer than me knew better, and I just sort of sucked up the advice like a sponge. And I think, Jill, your example around asking for a promotion every 6 months is really good, in that like the premise of that is really valuable, especially as women, that we should be pushing for growth. But that like sometimes that can come off wrong in a certain setting and environment. And so you sort of have to take the advice and then apply it to, to your position and how you want to navigate that, and that you have a choice in how to, take that advice and take action on it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that to anyone on this call. I actually think it's a great call, and I'm a huge proponent of that. But yeah, it just hadn't dawned on me that not all advice is the best advice for me. And I see that a lot in like the top 10 things to know on Inc.com or some of those, quick hit stories where a lot of times leaders are sharing that, you should be picky on the advice that you take. So promise we're trying to give you good advice today, but
it's all good. These are really good, juicy nuggets. And you touched on so many things. I'm writing furiously here. I want to ask about mentors, but I want to get back to the comment about asking for a promotion every 6 months. And yeah, we can discuss, is that the right advice for me at the time? But one of the things I see a lot of women coming up, who are coming up now and coming out of school struggling with is confidence. And we try really hard here at COM, I know that for sure, to prepare them academically with practical experience, but it's still the notion of how do I best position myself? And we'll know it's hard to ask for promotion. It's hard to ask for a raise. It's hard to do any of those things. So what is your advice for, what are some of the strategies and some of the skills to boost that confidence? Because we've had our private conversations. It's hard at different stages in your career. What's some of the best advice you could give to support that as you're growing in your career, to feel more confident and to practice that so that you can ask for those things? And by the way, the questions are coming in, so this is great. Thoughts on that? How do you boost yourself up?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of ways potentially to consider. One is having a game plan in mind, playing out the various scenarios in your head. And, it's just like designing a video game, right? So you have a bunch of end scenarios so that oftentimes when we internalize our insecurities, it's not really that it's a reflection on something that's wrong with us. It's a reflection of what the realities are of what the workplace or the industry is like, and what it's traditionally been. I mean, when we look at the numbers of women who have executive positions in the tech industry or who get venture capital funding, like in the VC funding world, I think that number is 1 or 2%. So really, it's a matter of thinking the scenarios through in your head, and also looking to models of success, no matter what gender they are. I learned a lot of negotiation skills from a lot of the men I happen to have worked with in tech, who were some of the best teachers. And I kind of mirrored a lot of their behaviors. So I think one thing is just to, if you're feeling that kind of nervousness, first of all, that's potentially a good thing, because it means you're going somewhere new. And then just to play out, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? And that worst thing might be really bad. If you ask for a raise, for example, you might have an attitude, or your tone, you might have a bad tone. That's, it could go there. But if it goes there, it's potentially better that you know that sooner rather than later.
It's great advice. I love that you likened it to a video game. That was fantastic. Other thoughts? Anyone want to weigh in?
I loved that too. I would just say, build up sort of the list. And I actually just every half, I sort of just keep the list of things that I've accomplished, the work that I'm doing towards like my goals. And I look at that, and I know kind of what the bar is to get to the next level, so that I can have an evidence-based argument. Because what I found is, like, saying like I deserve a promotion without that evidence is very weak. And so what you want to do is come in and say, based on my performance, I'm operating at this level. These are the things I've delivered on. And this is why I am, I am already delivering at the next level. So it's as if, you're not waiting to perform until you get promoted, but you're actually already there. And therefore they sort of are, should be giving you that promotion, because that's the level of work that you're doing. I think the other piece that Margaret was saying around almost gamifying it sometimes often has to do with the need within the company. If they don't need a director level at within the bucket of work that you're doing, it's going to be a lot harder to justify. So looking at how the business is growing and the direction that the business is heading, and aligning yourself with that. Sometimes that means looking for new opportunities, which can be just as exciting, and you can get creative. And then aligning yourself with some of those mentors, maybe leadership, other leaders who can back you, who can say, who are the first people that your boss will go to when they say, should I be promoting Kath? And making sure there are a couple folks there who can say, yes, I've seen Kath's work and she deserves to be, at this other level. Those would be my three.
I think that's really insightful to think about what else can you bring and where do you add value, rather than just, this is how hard I've been working and therefore I deserve some kind of recognition. I'd like to shift a little bit to mentors and the role that mentors have played in your career. Several of you told me in our conversations that mentors were essential, and others told me that you desperately wanted them but couldn't find them. Can we maybe talk a little bit about that? Anybody want to start?
Start on that.
Yeah.
I haven't really had in the past couple of years sort of like any set mentors, and I think it can be really hard. At least I found this in being someone who's been changing jobs a little bit and like figuring out my path. When I started, my first manager at the magazine I worked at was awesome. She was amazing, and she was my manager for a year. And had I stayed in that industry,
I probably would have hung my hat there because she is, you know, somebody that I really look up to. But then I was like, okay, but I don't really want to do that work anymore. I want to go here. And then I was there, and you know, I didn't really find anybody at my last job. And you know, now I'm at Amazon. And so it's only now that I'm sort of looking around and being like, okay, this is a piece that's missing for me. And it's missing like in general, just I think in life and being a woman in tech and just a woman with a job. And I think it's also missing for me at Amazon too, because, you know, I'm sure some of the other women experience this, that when you're at like a really big company and you're not in a management role, like there's a lot of stuff that I'm not privy to, that I kind of need somebody to be like, hey, this is how it works. Like, this is how getting promoted works. This is how you should talk to this person about this. And so it's something that I am going to try to work on. And it's advice that I would give anybody else, is that, you know, don't wait. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's doing exactly what you do. And then I think in turn, another really helpful thing that I want to try to get into myself is, how can I, even though I'm sort of early in my career in UX, be a mentor to other people as well? Because I think that also adds a lot of value too.
It's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I remember I read one of Jack Welch's books. I don't even remember what it was called, and it was years ago. And he was like, mentorship is overrated, you know. And I remember when I started working in Silicon Valley, one of the books that was going around at the time, besides Atlas Shrugged, was The 48 Laws of Power. And it was this Machiavellian book. And it's been nice to see how much the idea of mentorship has evolved and matured since that time. And I think that, you know, I've had some mentors probably in the past 10 years that I feel there's a real close relationship there with other, particularly female executives in tech. And that's been useful. I also have been mentoring. The Headstream Accelerator is one group that I mentor for, and a few others. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's just good to have a sounding board, and yet to still be able to, as was pointed out earlier, be in touch with yourself enough as somebody in the tech industry, maybe as a founder or maybe working at a larger company, to know whether that resonates. And that can take some time to figure out whether advice is relevant and resonates with you. I see that a lot among founders and entrepreneurs when they, especially if they're working out of the Bay Area. There's a lot of pressure to kind of follow the trajectory of, you know, the Y Combinator mindset, and to, you know, you're on this pathway as an entrepreneur. But there are many ways to be an entrepreneur. There are many ways to be a successful founder. And it takes some introspection that a lot of times we don't necessarily give ourselves the space to have to really know, you know, separate, you know, good advice versus information.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in, talk about mentors?
Yeah, I can share my thoughts on mentors. So I am a huge proponent of having a mentor, being a mentor, and having a mentor. I love the notion of having someone who's not in your direct group or business line, maybe. So I was really lucky coming straight out of college. The first two companies I worked for had female owners. So they were just evolved into being great mentors for me. Then when I moved over to LinkedIn, there's a really solid mentorship program that I joined. So you had an assigned mentor, and I had a really amazing mentor there. When I left and went to Snap, I realized the power of having a mentor before. So I actually sought one out. And my advice there is just, when you're seeking out a mentor, ask them why you'd like them to be your mentor. When you have your mentorship meetings, what you hope to get out of them. And again, when I asked this person, she was in a different business unit from mine, a few levels up for me, and I just really admired her work and her time there. So we met a few times, which was excellent. And then when I came back to LinkedIn, so I'm a boomerang hire. I left, I came back, and I mentioned this to Jody on my call, but a lot of the reasons why I was able to boomerang and come back to LinkedIn is because I had those mentors, some naturally in my own business group and some in different business groups who knew my name, who could advocate for me. And then now in the role that I'm at, I'm fortunate enough to mentor other folks. And I just think it's such a powerful way to stay connected to yourself, to have a sounding board and someone who can kind of give you an unbiased opinion or unbiased coaching that doesn't really have a stake in the game. It's just been really valuable for me. So my advice is seek it out.
Thank you. That's great. Kath?
Yeah, I will try to keep this succinct, but I have spent some time at both big tech companies and some small startups, and actually boomeranged back to a startup I had been at in the early 2010s because of a mentor as well. So the CMO was somebody who took me under her wing, gave me some great just sort of life advice as I was progressing in my career, which at the time felt so refreshing. And I look back and I seriously think that was more important than the career advice. More recently, when I have chosen to leave some big tech companies, which was a difficult decision, provided a place that I could go and continue to grow and kind of take a break from Silicon Valley, which is something personally I really needed. So again, like mentorship, I think is golden. I think unfortunately you can't always just sort of ask for it and it's there. I didn't have a ton of mentors earlier in my career. And then a couple have emerged, over the course of years. But so I understand what it feels like to really want it and not to have it. But when you can find someone who you can kind of continue to grow with over the years, I think that's great. So just because I left the company doesn't mean we stopped talking. We continued to stay in touch, keep each other abreast of what we were up to, and lo and behold, ended up going back and working for her for another couple of years.
That's great, and that's just the power of keeping those strong relationships open. I'm going to ask one more question, and whoever wants to answer this, please join in, and then we're going to go to the Q&A because there are lots of questions for you. Where do you see jobs opening up for women in tech today? Part one. And part two, what courses or training would you advise our students to be taking to be competitive in those fields? There's so many topics we couldn't even get to today. We need a part two. Okay. Job opportunities for women in tech, and how can they prepare?
I'm seeing a lot of opportunities in the artificial intelligence, machine learning arenas, and also data science as well. So at this point in time, if you have a technical grounding, that's always going to get you there, and you embrace it, and it's something you enjoy doing. That's always going to get you fairly far in the tech industry, because even if you don't end up being an engineer, quote unquote, there are many other things you can do. You can be a chief technical officer. You can be a sales engineer. There's a lot that you can be. A tech evangelist, which often requires an engineering degree. Data science, I mean, everything is data. So I'm seeing a lot of opportunities around there. And in terms of coursework, in addition to engineering, computer science classes, I would certainly look at anything in the arenas of human-computer interaction, design thinking, design, and also game design for that matter.
Great, thank you.
And I personally got into UX partially by taking a UX boot camp. And so to Margaret's point, human-computer interaction, design thinking, understanding that process is really helpful. There are lots of jobs in UX, although I will say, there are also a lot of people who are trying to get into that right now too. And so that's sort of, there's two sides to that coin. But even since I've joined Amazon, there's jobs that I didn't really know about. And I know people who I work with who are technical writers or UX writers. And so that's a really good way to use your comm background in tech as well. And like in my organization, like technical writing is super, super important because we work on like internal, like enterprise type systems. And also, I mean, you know, it's no secret, but like Alexa, voice design, I had never thought about that, but that's also something that somebody who can string a sentence together better than others, which I know we all can, being comm alums, is a really interesting space too.
Great, thank you. Any other advice?
Yeah, I would just say healthcare, especially during the pandemic and COVID. It's accelerated digital health by leaps and bounds. And pretty much every tech company represented here, I've seen massive hiring in health. And especially as a comms person, if you're a strong writer, like every single one of us, just like we're all consumers, we all consume healthcare. So healthcare touches all of us, you know, directly, indirectly. And so if it's something that you're passionate about, but maybe you haven't done a lot in that space, I would encourage you to pursue it. I don't think you have to have massive healthcare experience. I certainly didn't. I wished I had. I tried to be pre-med and comm, and it did not work out. But I ended up doing a lot of work in communications and healthcare to date, and I hope I keep going back to it over the years because I think it's a fascinating transformation that we're witnessing.
I second that wholeheartedly. Totally agree.
Excellent. Jill?
Yeah, I have a couple. So I think what I've seen become more and more important over the years are folks with project and program management skills. So I think every company is looking for ways to work more effectively, more efficiently, and to further drive scale. So if you have a baseline of project management, program management skills, agile thinking, I think there's just so many different organizations that you can plug into within a tech company. And then this is more moment in time, but we've seen my team sits within customer learning, and we work with recruiting organizations. And during the slower period within the pandemic, organizations really focused on upskilling their teams on how to more effectively use our tools. So there was much more of an emphasis on smart utilization, educating users to use the products correctly. So that was something that we saw becoming more important.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I'm going to turn, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to turn to some Q&A for everyone. First question is, thank you for the great advice, everyone. Based on your experience, do you think that workplace equality for women has been improved, or do we still have a long way to go? Anyone want to jump in there?
That's an
loaded question.
Go for it.
Oh, sorry. I thought Kath was going to speak. No, you've not gone far enough nearly at all. I'll give you another one of those little sound bites. It's not a pipeline problem, it's a doorbell problem. I mean, we need to diversify the tech industry. It's more important now than ever in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of geography. I mean, look, you know, a lot of, you know, every company at this point is a tech company in one way or another, every single company. And, you know, a lot of these things that are being decided need diversity. You know, if we look at the AI, the algorithms that are being written, they're being written by a very closed, small group, potentially non-diverse group, and that's affecting all of our lives. Look at how the platforms manifest those algorithms. It's one thing to have, you know, these one-off pitch events, or 2% of women founders getting funding from Silicon Valley, but we need radical change in the tech industry to even the playing field. There's been change. It's not happening fast enough.
You and I had a conversation about similar events happening about 20 years apart that speak to that. I agree with you. Other comments on that? Does anybody echo that or have a different view?
+1.
+1, yeah. Well, the flip side of that is a shout out to one of our male colleagues at COM who asks, what would you say to your male colleagues so that they could be better aware of how they are not being helpful, woke, and sensitive?
That's a great question. And actually probably a better one for me to answer. I was gonna say, I totally agree with Margaret, that I don't know. That certain days I do feel like I don't think about it. And then there are other days where it's very present and realize it. And I more recently, maybe 3 months ago, spoke on a pretty big call with like all of our top VPs. And as I was talking, I got a ping from a colleague commenting, saying I looked super serious. And the other comment was something about, it had to do with being serious. And I think I kind of can come off serious, so to be fair. But it kind of bothered me because like I've heard it before from this colleague who happens to be male. And I work on privacy. So like that's pretty serious, like sorry. And I remember just feeling kind of insecure about it. Because I had prepared really well and I thought it had come off fine, but you know, serious kind of felt negative to me. So I remember asking a female mentor, and her immediate response was, well, that sounds quite chauvinistic to me. And I like, it hadn't even occurred to me. My thought was, well, maybe I'm just, you know, I got to fix this. So yeah, I think like it's there, we live with it, but you know, your question is a good one. I mean, I didn't go back to him. I just sort of laughed it off and, you know, but maybe I could say, you know, hey, listen, like, yeah, I probably came off kind of serious, but you know, is that something you would have asked, you know, this other person who's male? Like, is that just a female comment? Or so I don't know, it could have sparked a conversation. I think sometimes that's the thing we need to be doing more of, is like in the moment, identifying the thing, you know, not being aggressive about it or like, you know, mean, but saying like, hey, listen, like that doesn't sit with me, or like, I don't quite understand what you mean. Can you tell me more? And I think more broadly with diversity and inclusion, like we have to just start walking the talk. We talk about it a lot, but in the actual moments is the hardest time to address it. But that's what.
It's interesting that one of the reactions was that it was something that you needed to fix. And I think that's something that we tend to do.
Yeah.
One of the questions that came in is, do you think that women are harder on themselves and don't forgive themselves as easily as men do in the workplace and in life? Which is
100%.
We just got a smile from everybody on that one. Question, how did all of you leverage your untraditional backgrounds and experiences when stepping into the tech industry? Anyone want to jump in on that one? Go ahead, Rachel.
This took a little bit of time to get better at, but especially when I was looking for my job before I joined Amazon and I was trying to move into UX, I think the best thing I did for myself was figuring out how to tell my story. And there's always going to be people who do not understand it, especially in tech. There's going to be people who study computer science or something in the tech world, and they're going to be like, I don't get you. But I got good enough at telling my story for like 6 months that when this job at Amazon came around and the hiring manager and this person that I was speaking about before, this is a person I lean really closely on now on my team. She studied English in college and she had a content background. And so when I interviewed with her, it made perfect sense. And I think it's just about like, how do you pull that thread through everything that you've done? And so like sometimes when I would have phone interviews, every single time I would have like a doc open where I would like written out my story. Because and that's like skills that we have from COM, is the storytelling. So maybe you even hook somebody who does have a tech background. Like I feel like a couple times I had recruiters who were like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. So I think that is the best thing that you can do. Also, I'll say too, quickly, like there are lots of people, I'm sure in other tech companies as well, at Amazon, I see this, who have like come from lots of different backgrounds to where they are. Somebody that interviewed me, she like majored in biology, and then she was a manager at Starbucks for like 10 years. And then she became like this boss lady in my org. And when I interviewed with her, I was like, wow, it doesn't even matter what you majored in. It just matters how you tell your story and what you've done. And that's really it.
So that answers a question. Someone said, thank you for this great tech panel. I wanted to ask all the panelists, do you have any tips to shine in an interview with tech firms, especially, I guess, given so many varied backgrounds? Is there anything that's universal that you would recommend to put your best foot forward that might cut across all of your companies?
I can share.
Please do.
I think that, so I was thinking actually, Rachel, to your point, I saw that question come through the chat before. Storytelling is huge, but then two other things that I think are so important. A lot of big tech companies and startups nowadays have culture and values. So do your research on those things. Oftentimes, each interviewer is interviewing for a certain thing, a certain competency or skill set. And one of the interviewers will be looking at culture and value fit. So that has always been important when I've been on interview panels in the past. And then the other thing that I think really sets folks apart, and I've been told has set me apart in the past, is doing your research. So researching the folks who are going to be interviewing you, and also researching the company, see what is the company's history, what's in the news lately, what are the projections. That will just make the interviewers feel like you're really invested in being here. And then, of course, the confidence and just remembering you got the interview. So you are there for a reason and should be confident in that.
That's great advice. Anything to add?
I would say specific examples, as much detail as possible to support a statement. So say, you want to present yourself and say, I'm very good at working in cross collaborative environments. Then have a strong example ready. It doesn't have to be a cross collaborative like tech environment, especially if you're, interviewing for your first job. It could be while I was at Com, I worked with this group of people, and I was doing X and this other person was doing Y, and we had a bunch of hurdles, and here's how we navigated. But plugging in the specific example is a really strong move. And I've over the years tried to do that as much as possible. And again, to Jill's point, like, unless you prepare, you might not have that example like at the ready, even though you have a ton of experience. So I think that's one of the best ways to show you can succeed in a tech role without tech background. You definitely don't need it. I would +1 to Rachel, like, we have been hiring people from all different backgrounds more recently. And I think all of tech is going that direction. So it's just a matter of showing you have the skill set. Doesn't have to be a tech example.
Fantastic, thank you. It's amazing of the questions that are coming in. So many of them are asking, what can I do to shine in tech? I'm thinking of transitioning or adding to my resume, whether my background is journalism or television or emerging media studies. I think, Margaret, you said it beautifully before when you said everything is tech now. So I think we are just about wrapped up, and I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today. There are so many other things I really wanted to talk to you about. Nudge, nudge, maybe we need to have 2.0. Thank you so much for joining us today. If this panel, this recording will be up on our Com website soon, so I encourage everybody to listen to it in its entirety again, and please share it with your friends and colleagues who might be interested in it. Likewise, if you're interested in learning more about the Masters in Media Ventures graduate program, there will be a link in the chat going up shortly for more information. And finally, I hope that you'll join us for the next Com Talk, which will be on November 18th at 5 p.m. And that will be called Black Creatives, Getting Your Foot in the Door and Beyond. Again, that's November 18th at 5 p.m. And yep, you can see the details for that right here. Thank you all so very much. Thank you, Dean DeChristina, for having us here today. And good afternoon to everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yay for
Thanks.
calm. Woo.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.